Hello everyone. I am Anna from GreenGeeks, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on accessibility by our guest speaker, Merari Alvarado. We're going to introduce Merari in a moment, but glad to have you here, Merari, and Marco and Erica. So real quick, before we start, I wanted to say a couple of words about GreenGeeks. For those of you that are watching us and may not be familiar with us, we're a 300% green energy web hosting provider, which essentially means that we put back 3 times the amount of power we consume into the grid in the form of renewable energy. We have been recognized by the US EPA since 2009 as Green Power Partner. We offer share hosting, reseller hosting, VPS, and dedicated server. Also, I wanted to share something with our attendees today, a new initiative that GreenGeeks is doing to enhance our commitment to the environment. For every customer who signs up for our web hosting services, we will plant a tree with 1 tree planted. So now moving on to the webinar, a couple of housekeeping items. Go ahead, put your question in the Q&A. Merari will be answering them at the end of the presentation. You are welcome to chat in the chat room. Remember to select all panelists and attendees if you want everybody to see what you're discussing. And as always, you know, we record this. So if you have to step away, don't worry, because we send your recording in the next couple of days. Now I'm going to introduce our team here at GreenGeeks. Erica will be assisting us with the chat and the Q&A. Hey, welcome, Erica. Do you want to introduce yourself to the attendees?
Thank you, Anna. Hi, Marco, Anna, and Merari, and hi, everyone. My name is Erica Barbosa. I am from Costa Rica. I work in the partners team, and today I'm going to be in the chat, reading your comments and sharing some information. And I hope you enjoy today with my good friend Merari, this webinar, and thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Erica. Marco, you want to introduce yourself, and then you do the honor of introducing Merari. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Marco Berrocal. I am a WordPress developer, and I work on numerous topics here at GreenGeeks. I should say partner relations, but sometimes I can't say it. It depends on the context. So I would like to say hello. It's good to be on this side as well. I hope you guys have a good time today. And I am going to introduce someone I met a year ago, I think. No, yes, a year ago. It was a very fun experience, to say the least. I think Erica was there as well. It was a year ago. We were all in WordCamp Miami. I met Merari Alvarado. I've heard of her. And, we got acquainted. We became, good friends, and we exchanged a lot of memes in WhatsApp and whatnot. So about Merari, she's, I would say she's everywhere. As far as the digital world is concerned, she's someone with 10 plus years of proven experience in executing development and leadership of QA processes in digital strategies for a lot of Fortune 100 clients. And she has a lot of experience as a digital accessibility consultant, establishing guidelines, best practices, and standards that are related to designing and maintaining accessible websites, which is really, really important, responsive sites, native applications, and digital documentation. And she is also a member, and that's why I said she was all over the map. She's a member of the Quality Assurance Costa Rica and Accesibilidad Web Costa Rica group in Facebook, as well as the Vice President of Society of Women Engineers in Costa Rica. And last but not least, an Asociación Central American Association of Aeronautics and Space. And I think that's about it. That was a lot. So I give the controls to Merari, and welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I'm really pleased to be here. I think I'm going to talk about a topic that I love the most, and that topic that I've been working on for a couple of years now. So thank you so much for this time, and I'm going to start sharing my presentation. Please let me know if you can see it. Okay. Okay. You probably said, what a tomato. Why do we have a tomato in here? There is a long story about this. Like 6 or 7 years ago, someone told me that I'm just was a bad tomato and I couldn't have anything good, any good future. So I usually remember this using a tomato as reference, but thank you. Okay, so let's start. I don't know, Anna, I'm ready.
Yeah, go ahead, Merari. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay, so the topic for today is really important for many reasons because we need to understand the importance of accessibility. And usually when we talk about accessibility, we just understand that accessibility is something that we just add in the code and that's it. And it's one time and that's it. In terms of accessibility, that is not the reality, right? So that is important to understand. But I would like to talk a little bit more about me in terms of accessibility, telling you a story. When I was 16 years old, I was at the high school and usually loved to sit down at the first row of the bus just to talk with the bus driver. Probably at that time it was good, but now it's kind of creepy. But at that time it was good. So one day, just one young woman carrying a baby stood up in front of the bus door and started using her hands to talk with us. I was shocked. I didn't know how to do. Neither the bus driver. None of the other passengers know how to do, right? I just was super frustrated because I'm super crazy. Marco and Erika can just confirm that. And just that time just stood up in my seat and start just yelling and using my hands and just doing many things just to get attention for these women. I couldn't do anything. And the answer that that completely changed my life was the answer that the bus driver did. He closed the door in her face. I just was stood up in my seat and just I was watching her behind the door, a blurry door. Just she stood up for a couple of seconds, then left, and I felt bad. I just remember crying the entire road to the high school, and I said, just what happened? What just happened? What just happened? Was the first time when I just listened or I had experience just talking with a person with disabilities. Never in my house we had the opportunity to have this conversation. So it was really painful for me. I just suffered for a lot of years. So that's why I decided to get involved in some communities with disabilities. And after then 15 years later, I was practicing my sign language and I was invited to a cafeteria in San Jose downtown. And most of the visitors are deaf users. And at that time, I was just having a conversation, and one woman just approached to me, and we start talking. And at that time, she just asked me, "Why was the reason to be part of the deaf community if I'm not deaf?" And just tell her the story, and she started to crying. And she said, "I remember you." Sorry, it's still emotional. She said, "I still remember you trying to help me in the bus long time ago." And she gave me a beautiful gift. She gave me the sign, my name sign from the deaf community. So that's why I discovered why accessibility is really important. Even though 15 years later, I discovered that this is really important for so many reasons that we are going to talk today. Okay, I would like to make a question, and please think about that. Have you ever felt left out? Think about it. Probably in so many reasons, probably in a party, in a conversation, But what about a service? What about if someone refused to just serve you because you don't look like them, or because you have a different accent, or because you don't look like them, or you don't have the same money than them? So that's the same situation that we usually have when we're talking about accessibility. And accessibility and disabilities can be completely aligned. At the same time, we need to relate this for business and identify what is important for business. And let me talk about two important concepts. The first concept that I would like to mention is exclusion. Usually, we are part of this model and we don't know. We usually understand that people with disabilities is a group, people with other ethnicities is a group, and then we just classify people as per a group, and we segregate, and we don't know. Usually, we don't know that. We usually do this by default because we don't learn how to unlearn things in this 21st century. We're still doing the things that are not good, right? And this is one of the first word that I would like to just say, show you. And the second word that I think is really important is the segregation. And we say, okay, being part of the business, we need to create documentation, we need to create digital products. And we said, okay, this site will be for people without disabilities, and this site will be for people with disabilities. Or let's just create this specific widget for people with disabilities. Okay, and we usually be part of this, also this specific content or mindset, because we don't know. But that's the idea of the training of today. Try to learn to understand this and try to avoid how can we just change our parameters, change our mindset, and try to investigate a little bit more about that. Okay, so I would like to share a couple of images with you. Usually when we see content in the media, what is the first image that came to your mind when we are talking about disabilities? Just think about a couple of seconds. What is the first image when we are talking about movies, TV shows? What is? Or what is the first image that came to your mind when you are talking about disabilities? I probably say that is people using a wheelchair. That's the most common. Or the sign of disability. That's the most common. We don't have any other topic in our mind that will be different that they usually see in movies or in videos, etc. Right? But what do you think, or how do you feel if I show you those images? I'm going to give you like 5 seconds to just feel the images. Pay attention to the details. Okay. What do you think about it? You probably feel good because you are seeing something different, right? In some of the images, you can feel part of it, right? You can feel part of, you can feel also identified with some of the scenarios, right? But we usually don't find this in the media, and that's why it's important to communicate this. Did you know that only 2% of the images in Google are representing people with disabilities? Only 2%. 2% is nothing against the world of Google and images. And that's why it's important to talk about. And that's why I would like to share something with you, but I don't know. I don't remember how can I just share my audio. Share sound. Yeah, I guess I did. Okay, I would like to share this video with you. Just please pay attention. If you want some comment, if you have some comments about that, you can share in the chat so Erica can share that with me as well.
The faces you see in your day-to-day life ultimately define your perspective on what's normal.
What you're frequently seeing is this idea of disabled as lesser, disabled as something that needs to be fixed. I don't need to be fixed from what I am. I just want to be included. And I think that we all do.
People with disabilities make up about 20% of the population, but only 2% of our media. Let's change that.
Okay, let's go.
Verizon, the disability community, and Getty Images are creating a new photo collection that more accurately reflects the lives and diversity of people with disabilities.
We can do anything, and it requires the media to help get that message out.
Let's change how the world sees disability.
Thank you.
Get started at thedisabilitycollection.com.
Okay, let me start. Okay. That is great, right? To watch this type of videos. It's kind of very comforting to have this information and say, okay, we are doing something. That's the reason of this talk today. So let's talk about accessibility. What is the meaning? What is the meaning of accessibility, and what is important to have in mind when we are talking about this topic? First point: it's a human right. Accessibility is a human right. It's not something that just invented a couple of months ago or a couple of years back. No, it's a human right. Since the day first you was born, you have the human right to have accessibility in all of the things that you are doing. Second point: thinking about or talking about accessibility is important because it's an opportunity for inclusion. So by keeping this concept in mind, but also applying this concept in different digital products, we have the opportunity to include more people with disabilities as part of our audience because it's important. Okay. Third point: as a service, we can just implement accessibility, integrate accessibility as part of our products and say, okay, we can just improve this project, we can enhance this project, we can create new projects by keeping in mind accessibility and thinking about innovation as well. Okay. And finally, we can create more usable accessibility. And you probably said, what? Usable and accessibility? What is this? Okay, usually sometimes we apply accessibility because we think it is accessibility, but it's not usable. And sometimes we apply usable components, but that are not accessible. So the idea is to have the balance between these two concepts and create better products for everybody. Okay. So moving forward to the next slide. Okay. Okay. One of the important things that we need to also understand is when we are talking about accessibility, it's important to understand that it's not something that we can add in the code. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle for many users. Because if you remember, part of the video says that we usually get used to the word normal because we don't know other environments. So that's why we need to understand that accessibility is part of the life of many users that we usually bought of our products. So that's why it's important to keep that in mind. There is important to mention to the clients when we are working with the stakeholders that what is our vision of accessibility as well? What is our compromise with accessibility? So that's why it's important. We can just also mention that accessibility needs to be incorporated since the planning of the project, not until testing. And we are going to see that today. But definitely we need to understand that that's the reason to incorporate accessibility. And also because yes, accessibility matters. That is important. This type of conversations can help us out to just communicate to the client what is expected in terms of accessibility. And one of the other factors that I think it's important to mention, there is no project, there is not 100% project that will be accessible. Okay, but we need to be prepared. We need to create backup plans. We need to create corrective actions. We need to create preventive actions in order to just keep our sites or digital products accessible. Okay, so it's impossible just to promise 100% accessibility, but definitely you can promise that you will work on that and improve their sites. Okay, now let me talk about an important topic. We talk about accessibility as a human right, correct? Why now about talking about inclusive economy? What is the relationship between these two concepts? That is important. As a leaders, as a content creators, as a developers, as a designers, as a testers, and different capabilities that are part of the creation of digital products in the market, we are part of a society. And in this society, our our goal is to make everybody part of the things that we are working on, right? So an inclusive economy, it's important for us because we have the responsibility to create digital products that are accessible for everyone. And in an inclusive society, we are looking for that. When we are talking about inclusive societies, definitely we are talking about all the participants in the society. Doesn't matter if this person or these people have a disability, or have disabilities, or sorry, it doesn't matter the gender, of the background, of the color, of the everything. So that's why it's really important to just understand that inclusive economy will be good for everyone. And the idea is try to prevent exclusion. One of the topics that we discussed at the beginning of our presentation, okay? Now, one of the other things that I really would love to talk with you or share with you is if you are able to start implementing accessibility in your sites, you need to understand the concept of disability. If you don't understand this, please go back, learn about the concept, and start over. Okay? Disability is really important for so many reasons. Why? Because you need to understand what is the concept, what is the context. In the video, we noticed that many people talk about disability is something that you can just within taking a shower, with a cold shower, you just remove disability. No, it's not that the case. So that's why we need to understand what is the concept. Actually, the concept has been evolved with the time. And at the beginning of this concept, we learned a lot about that it was people fault, right? And that's not the case now. We notice, and also the World Health Organization understood, that it's something related to the social environments, to the environments that we've been creating for years, that are promoting disabilities, or that are promoting inaccessible sites, inaccessible buildings, inaccessible physical environments, etc. The concept of disability is complex, definitely it is, but we can understand why it's important to do this and apply accessibility in our sites. So in this case, one of the important things is try to understand that usually is the interaction between the digital, the technology, against the different environments that we have. What is the expectation of our products as well? It's not people with disabilities' fault not to have access to all the things that we are creating. So that's why it's important to understand disability. And the next concept that I would like to talk today is ableism. We talked already about segregation, exclusion, inclusive economies, disability, and ableism, and we usually be part of this all the time, and we don't know that. Usually, when we're talking about ableism, is a type of discrimination that we use usually in our words, in some of the ways that we are communicate things, and we don't know about that. And also, when we are talking about ableism, we are talking about that some people think that people with disabilities is less than that, and that's not good. Let me give you some examples about some of the things that we usually do, and we are not noticing that we are just offending people, okay? And we didn't know that we usually are part of this specific of discrimination portion. That's why it's important. Mental illness is important. Syndromes are important. Deficit, it's important, and we need to understand this. And we don't need to play with this, okay? Now, another important question that I need to make today: what do you understand about disabilities? You probably didn't have the opportunity that I had when I was 16 years old, right? To discover disability in that way. Probably you have some people with disabilities around you, or probably you don't have any relationship with people with disabilities, and you probably never talk with a person with disabilities. And that's important to understand, because as a creators, as a leaders, as all the roles that I mentioned before, we need to understand this also, because we need to learn how to unlearn things if we need to create better digital products. So let me explain a little bit about the types of disabilities that we can find in the internet, or a specific high-level classification of the disabilities. Usually when we are talking about disabilities, we are talking about bias. We have some bias about disabilities, and we usually don't know that we have some bias. In Costa Rica, most of the time we said, "Oh, poor angel," to people with disabilities, and that's so bad and that's so terrible. Let me pray for you. Come on, that's not okay. Okay, and we usually don't think that disabilities are normal, and that is important, because when we are talking about disabilities, this is normal. For example, um, I bet that more of the attendees today are wearing glasses, right? And we usually, when we need to just change our glasses, we think about the frame. Oh, this year I'm going to take a new frame and it will be red, like mine today. Or I'm going to just buy a fancy frame, like Gucci or something like that. That's nice, right? But please let me tell you something. You are part of the low vision community. So you are part of a disability community, because you need glasses to do things, to watch properly. So that's why it's important to just think about normal, about disability is normal, okay? Because in our life we can have different type of situations when we are going to be part of the disability community in different ways, okay? And disability is not only associated to elder citizens or something that is a like critical disease. That is not, okay? Let me tell you that the different types of disabilities that we have, we need to understand is, the first one is the permanent. What is the permanent? The one that we usually can see. People using a wheelchair, or someone who is blind, someone who is deaf, or has some speech impairments, right? So, or they have some amputations in their bodies. So those are the ones that we usually can see and that are permanent for the person. So this is the first classification. The second one is the temporary one. What it means. For example, if you're super fan of football, or if you like, I don't know, volleyball or any other sport that probably can injure to you, you probably have some injuries in your arms or in your legs, and you are not able to walk properly for a couple of months or for a couple of weeks. Or with with COVID, if you got COVID, you can definitely just you have some pain in your throat and you were not able to speak correctly for a couple of days or weeks, etc., right? So this is a temporary situation, and in this case we can just call this a temporary disability, and usually all members present in this training will be part of this, okay? Third one, situational, and this one, it doesn't need, well, actually this one is not related to any physical disabilities or mental disabilities. No, it's mostly the environment. Let me mention and give you an example right now. I really love Korea. I really have this crazy idea to go and visit Korea one day and try to use my poor Korean to communicate with a native Korean. Can you imagine my Korean accent talking in Korean with a native in Korean? It will be kind of difficult, right? But it's not related to disabilities. It's the environment in that case that it's affecting my communication, but it's not specifically a disability. But this one is also a situation that can be just promote disabilities, okay? And finally, we can have the invisible disabilities. And in this one, I guess everyone has the opportunity to be part of this section, okay? because we usually have depression, or we have high volumes of stress because of our job, or we just feel super tired, burned out because we are doing many things. So that's why it's important to understand that we also have this, and we need to think about all of those aspects when we are creating content for people with disabilities, or when we are implementing accessibility. Okay, based on this information and also the global classification that we have in the market, there are a certain type of disabilities in internet. And there are 6 classifications, and one is the visual disability. The second one is related to hearing or auditory disabilities, mobility and dexterity, speech impairments, cognitive disabilities, which is the most common in internet, and seizures disorder. And in this case, we need to talk about hypersensitivity to lights or motions or many other actions that we usually provide in our sites. Okay. So, based on everything that I talk right now, how can we start defining the status quo in order to create better digital products? As a consultant in terms of accessibility, that's the most common question that I received. Do you know how much is the percentage of people with disabilities who access the site? And this immediately broke my heart in thousands of pieces. Why? Because you are excluding people since the beginning. You are not you're not having the vision about what would be the importance to include people with disabilities since the planning section, since since the first set of conversations, right? So let me tell you about something. Actually, 90% of the top global companies in the market says that they are inclusive, which is great. We are looking for that. Only 56% of those leaders are really talking a little bit about disability, and only 4% are really integrating disability and accessibility in their digital products. This number is critical. It's critical because we are still promoting this gap between people with disabilities and new technologies. Okay? And let me tell you about something that is really important that we need to keep in mind. We usually see this type of disability tropes most common in media, but actually they are impacting as well our business and the way that we see new resources, new projects, new digital products, innovation. First point of this disability trope, victim. We usually think that people with disabilities are victims. Oh, poor people with disabilities, we need to go and help them, right? So I decide that my business, we promote or sponsor like 20% of people with disabilities, mostly the deaf community. But there is not a specific good reason behind that support. It's because that company wants recognition, and that's not good. That are not truly providing support to deaf community. They are looking for social reinforcement about this. And that is really bad. Billing. And in this case, I'm talking about the resource process, like recruitment processes. And when a person has a specific mental illness like attention deficit, or they are part of the autism spectrum, we usually think that no, sorry, we are not hiring people with mental illness because it's dangerous. One day this person can explode and this person will kill everyone. That's one of the comments that I heard. So this is a real comment that I heard, because usually people says no, I don't want. So many people need to lie in order to get a job, and that is not good. And that's why we need to just to remove this. The other one is something that I noticed in the past, and I notice this more common now. We just hired a new person with disabilities. This person has a really value in their community. For example, we have a deaf member of the company, which is great. He's an activist. He knows about many things about the community, and we know everything. And this person can help us so much to create new processes, etc. But the position that we are providing to this person is the lowest in the hierarchy, because we are paying less to have this person. This person knows so many things about their community, but we are just paying less because our advantage is to have this person in the company paying less, but doing a lot of things in terms of disabilities. That is so bad. Please think about it. And the final one, and I think it's the most dangerous, is the hero, more related to people without disabilities, the leaders, the content creators, the designers that usually think that I have the power. I have the power to create for people with disabilities. And that's not the case. We are responsible about it. We have the responsibility to create content that is accessible because it's a human right, first of all. Then we have laws in our governments that do need to follow. So it's not something that we just, I have the power so I can create more accessible content. No, that's not the case. So please take care about these specific concepts because they are really important to keep in mind. Okay. Now we can talk a little bit about the best practices that we can apply when we are creating accessible sites or accessible digital products. One of the first steps that we need to contemplate is understand the regulations. What are the regulations that we need to follow? Usually we need to follow in the regulations in different levels. First of all, what is the universal or the international level that we need to meet in terms to create our digital products accessible? Then if we need to just be aligned with, for example, a specific country, and my example is specifically focusing in United States. So we need to talk about federal levels. Like, for example, Section 508, the Civil Rights ADA, we need to we need to talk about the industry, and in this case we can just think about media. What is my content? If I'm creating content for TV shows, etc., we need to talk about the Telecommunications Act. And also if we are working with like American Airlines, we need to just also follow another federal law that is mandatory as well. So that is important. And the other is what's happening if I'm working in California, for example. My product is from California. California and the state of Illinois have a specific strict normatives in terms of accessibility, and you need to meet them. In some other states that are desirable, but for those states are mandatory. So we need to keep that in mind as well. And also, what are my internal policies? What is my culture in terms of disability? In case talking about my company, right? What is my culture? What is my vision about disability, about accessibility? Okay, that is important. Second point, talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act of Section 508. This specific normative, it's related to providing service to is provide services or digital services to public institutions in the United States right now. So this specific normative are following like 6 standards that you need to understand. 4 of them are digital, and then you have other 2. One is related to hardware, so that is important. Also test accessibility in hardware. And then we have documentation, right? Documentation like PDF files, Word documents, PowerPoints, everything that will be accessed by digital documents needs to be accessible as well. So that's the top one, right? Second one, which is it's really important because it's the universal recommendation of guidelines that we need to keep in mind when we are just creating content for our pages. This specific guideline is focusing in web accessibility, right? Like mostly for websites. We have other regulations for specifically for code or for PDF files, but this one is the most common related to websites. And I would like to just share this one with you because you are working using WordPress. And this is the authoring tool accessibility guidelines. And in this case, it's really important because this regulation impacts all the structure about WordPress, all the specific admin tool, to say in that way, the authoring tool, and then the content that we are just going or taking to live or production environments, right? We need to take care that when we are creating content in WordPress, all the environment, the authoring tool is accessible for people with disabilities. In this case, it will be developers or owners of this tool, and also the content that we are providing is also accessible. So it's just promoting two ways of accessibility, okay? Since the creations to the promotion of the content, okay? Now, the levels of conformance. In the market, we have three levels. From the guidelines, we have three levels. The most recommended per the industry, for the industry environment right now, is to meet the level A, double A. So AAA is kind of difficult to get in, but companies like Netflix, for example, is just having best practices in terms of AAA. But the requirement from the market right now is to meet the level of conformance AA, which is which is involving the most common disability that we already checked, right? The internet disability. So that's why it's important to meet that. And in order to meet the level, the AA, we need to just also meet the level A, right? That is important to understand. Okay. What will be the first step when we start integrating accessibility in our products? Reshape the bias. Why do you think about the business? What is the culture of your team? Start involving consultants, experts in accessibility. Try to understand what is your industry, the prior, the most important projects or the most important areas in your site or in your business, to start creating the opportunity, to start creating project products that will be accessible in a good way. Okay, so that's important. And start trying to planning since the beginning, or incorporating since the beginning of the planning conversations accessibility, because it will be reduce a lot of costs. Okay, how can we integrate accessibility? Actually, accessibility, it's not only as part of the testing section. It will be not part only in the testing section, because it's kind of critical and complicated, and I'm going to explain about that. But we can just incorporate accessibility for innovation. We can just use accessibility references and best practices to start creating new projects, new products, something that probably we cannot imagine to have right now, because we don't have another perspective, or we don't have another view. And usually people with disabilities can provide us different point of views that can help us out to create really great projects and innovative products. Redesign. Sometimes we have the budget, we have people trained, we have experienced developers, designers, and really smart managers. And there's important to redesign a site. We need to implement accessibility for this new redesign. Okay? Retrofitting. Sometimes we don't have the proper budget to design, but we need to start working with something or start doing something. So it will be good to start with the code. So also we can implement accessibility best practices in the code, even though if we are not able to change the design. And of course, accessibility is not one-time option. It's a continuous improvement. So that's why it's important to incorporate accessibility as part of maintenance process in our daily task, or in the development and the software development lifecycle. Okay. The other point, measure. What will be the extra time? Yes, it could take a little bit more time just to create accessible websites, but definitely we can just start creating strategies, tactical strategies to create also our content. Start defining roles and responsibilities for people with the into the developers department. So if we have like 10 developers, we say, okay, let's assign 2 persons from the developer department focusing only on accessibility. So these persons needs to understand about accessibility and start designing the standard that we need to apply it in code, right? Also, if possible, of course, that would be awesome. Start involving or getting involved people with disabilities as part of their teams. I know it's difficult because the companies are not really mature in terms of contract people with disabilities in a good way, but we can definitely do it. There are so many options and so many companies that you can just keep in mind in order to provide you additional consultancies or references about how to contract people with disabilities. Okay, get involved accessibility as part of the design, the planning, the strategies, and of course, like try to understand what will be the specific tools that we need to use per different type of the different sections from the software development life cycle, right? That is important. Okay, the other point, testing management. And with this one, I want to be really critical because this is important. In terms of testing, when we are in a normal process, in a normal software development life cycle, we are in the testing phase, right? And we have a QA miss, or we have some bugs that went through production. We immediately notify the client and just roll back and say, okay, let's fix that and just release that the fix. In the case of accessibility, in the testing section, we cannot do that. If we are not providing the best standards before to go to production, we usually don't identify if something is missing until we have a lawsuit. And that is critical. That is expensive, super expensive. And I was reading a couple of days back about the state of Illinois, and they usually, if we are failing with some type of disability, we can go to prison until for 16 years in prison for this. So it's really bad. Okay, so that's why it's important. Try to create always the user stories or the specific section from accessibility, the accessibility acceptance criteria that we need to follow in our sites. Try to just define what will be the best way to report an accessibility defect. Define what will be the specific tools that we need for testing. What will be investigate about what are the specific tools that we have in the market that are approved by this project. Also include people with disabilities in your team. That would be really great. And train your people. Train your people, because it will be like a important learning curve when we are learning about accessibility, because if we don't have disabilities, the interpretation of the standard will be kind of difficult to just do during the first months. So that's why it's important. About the themes, when we're talking about WordPress, not all trendy themes are always accessible. So that's why we need to take care so much when we are just using the themes in terms of accessibility. Okay, let me show you one video that is important to mention in this presentation for you. Okay.
Everyone should have a passion.
I love fashion. I like to dress nice.
I love books. I love sewing.
What I'm passionate about is that everything should work for everybody.
I'm currently working as a mathematics teacher in a school for the blind.
I was a social worker years ago, and because of my hearing loss, I could not do my job anymore, and I left my job.
I have cerebral palsy, and I use assistive touch, and I am access all the features.
The advancement of technology has really been helpful to me. Now I use my phone for going online almost exclusively.
If there wasn't accessibility, I wouldn't be here. I'm using my phone to read what you're saying. I have an app.
In my hand, I can hold a device that keeps me connected to the world. And the only question is, how do I access it? Everyone else is looking at their smart devices, and I have to listen to it.
I need a consistent environment. I don't need something that's cute. I'm not here for cute. I'm here for efficiency. The machine is making things easier for me. If it makes things harder, it goes in the bay.
There should be something for someone like me where I could have an insight of what's trending and get to know what goes with my body type, what goes with my skin color.
Each of us have our own needs. We're all on a spectrum. And on that spectrum, all we need are the right tools to be able to gain access to what we need.
All of this technology has been absolutely life-changing for me and for people with hearing loss.
Accessibility, to me, is like the air. It has to be there all the time.
That's powerful, right? I'm not looking for something cute, she said. Accessibility is like the air for me. So that's important. So let me just do something here. Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, perfect. So let me explain a little bit about this number, 70%. Usually, people that are suffering different type of disabilities are affected by the 70% in their user experience. They usually take like around the 70% of the people with disabilities that are just navigating your site. And if they notice that the site is not accessible, they abandon the site in less than 4 seconds, which is terrible, right? So, and they usually recommend or not recommend sites when they are accessible or not. So that's why it's important. How can we just understand this? Usually, when we are talking about accessibility with the lawsuits in United States, at least, only in 2020, more than 3,000 lawsuits were set for 4 important reasons. Keyword navigation. The sites are not keyword accessible. Not keyword accessible. The components are not keyword accessible. And also a screen reader. I guess this is one of the most important. We usually don't test our sites using assistive technology. Testers, the developers also use screen readers to navigate the sites. So that's why it's important. Use of colors. As I said, all the trend topics not always are the accessible ones. And usually we don't think about the colorblind scenarios, people who is colorblind, or we are depending on colors only to get actions in order, and it will be better to have additional information to provide reference to the users. Visual presentation of the page. Do you remember that at the beginning of the presentation, as I said something that we are looking for usable accessibility? Sometimes we have usable scenarios, but that are not accessible. And those are the most common related to lawsuits as well. Okay, how can we just start changing this parameter? Let's talk about the diverse persona. Usually when we are just checking about the diverse persona, we have some reference really great about that. Well, not the diverse persona, the user persona. In terms of best practices of design, the user persona, the user persona for a business could be an entire career. It could be a full-time job. But usually, if you go right now to Google and look for, and just make a search that says user persona, then open another tab and just make the same search, but using the word accessibility user persona, you will see the difference. Let me do it if you did that in the comments so we can just share a little bit about. Okay. What will be the best practice that we can just follow in here? Try to make it a diverse persona and start including important things that are important also for people with disabilities. The disability is one of them. What type of challenges this person could have in terms to navigate my site? That is important. What type of assistive technology this person needs to use to navigate my site? There will be like magnification tools, screen reader tools. What will be the ones, right? So that is important. And what will be some of the different scenarios that we can find in here? If you notice, those are images that are really old. That's why I just suggest to make the reference and make the search using the user persona and the user accessibility persona, because actually even the results that we have in Google are biased. So that's why we have these images that are old, but this is a really great example about also how can we just make diverse personas. If you notice, we are creating in here what is the specific disability, what type of aptitude this person has in terms of life and how to interact with internet and communication. What is the attitude? What, this person will be able to navigate using captions, using a specific set of tools, or I don't know, different type of visual presentation, etc. Okay, then we have the assistive technology. It is really, really important to understand that people needs to access with assistive technology. And in this case, probably we can see about, in this case, we can see desktop. And in this case, we are seeing devices. Also devices. Sometimes we need to incorporate devices in order to create a diverse persona. And I'm not thinking in a scenario right now. I'm usually thinking about my parents. I try it so hard just to teach them how to use a computer. It was impossible. Impossible. They are not old, but for them, the usability where the laptops were created or are created, the Windows, etc., it's difficult for them. But if I provide them right now a device, they can use the device right now, immediately understood everything, because the usability from the device is completely different to the desktop. So it will be really easy for the persons. So try to just keep that in mind as well. One of the final topics in terms of all of this, it's try to start incorporating design methodologies in our site. And I would like to recommend 4. Inclusive design, human-centered design, universal design, and product design. And each of them are really great for design better digital products. And I cannot explain a lot about all the methodologies, but I would like to say some of the important words, the magic words that I usually mention about these type of methodologies. By the inclusive design, always think about consistency. Consistency is key for people with disabilities. Because if you just, sorry, constantly change your site and create different elements that can be difficult to navigate using keyword, as we saw, right, or screen readers, it will be really bad for the user experience. In terms of human-centered design, empathy. We usually don't think about people with disabilities when we are designing, and that is important. From universal design, tolerance to errors. And you probably said, what? How intuitive in order to navigate is our site? I already mentioned an example about desktop and also devices. Is our site it's intuitive enough to understand everything that we have right now? Think about that. And product design, program obsolescence. What does this think about? COVID improved a huge digital transformation for many of us, right? Are we planning our sites in a way that we can just integrate accessibility at the same speed that we are moving forward with technology? Are doing that? So that's why product design can give us this type of vision. So please think about that. Okay. Technical resources in order to finish our presentation. Let's start with WordPress and start creating best practices. You can go to these specific handbooks. You can find in this handbook training resources for developers, for designers, best practices, and also we are able to find some testing strategies and checklists that you can use and integrate in your software development life cycles. That's great information that you can access. Also, you can have a full guide of how to create WordPress accessible and make it more accessible for developers, specifically content for training. I really like this site in particular because also we are able to find reference for public services, which is critical in the United States. So you can keep that in mind every time you are creating new sites. Themes. How can we use themes and make it more accessible? There are a specific feature from the theme directory that you can select and validate that if this team is accessible, or if we have some reference about accessible. So why is important to keep in mind as well? Not because you are already checking this specific feature from the team directory, make the team accessible. You need to double check that, right? Just to don't trust completely in the team, but you need to go and check and validate if all the accessible things that we are having right now are really accessible. Tools, useful tools, plugins. For example, we have the WordPress accessibility plugin that is great. It's a really great tool. It's a plugin that can help us out just to validate accessibility in WordPress, but definitely you can just try to use another type of plugins. Only to have one automated plugin will be not enough. I guess you need to have at least 2 or 3 that are really valid and trustful. So you can use different. Actually, I'm providing you different options. And in this case, the RCR toolkit and also the accessibility insights is really good. And the expert are really, really great. So you can validate the sites, review the code, and understand what is happening in terms of accessibility. Just one important thing. Those are covering only 30% of the success criteria related to web content accessibility guidelines. So that's why you need to incorporate manual strategies for validation. So for example, you need to contemplate the screen readers, and those are the most common in the market. JAWS, which is a third-party tool. Okay, so you need to pay for it. But then we have MBDA, which is one of the most used right now for the blind community. So you can have this specific information available for free, and it working specifically in Windows, as is an open source. And then one of the other commons, as you notice in the video, it's VoiceOver or Talkback based on app devices or smart devices, Android or iOS. Okay. One of the final things, if you don't have the opportunity to just hire people with disabilities in your team, or if you don't have the opportunity just to test, including people with disabilities, or probably you don't have inclusive labs in your company, you can just hire services. And this is one of them, Fable. Fable is a really great platform, including the people with disabilities, and all of the members have some disabilities, and they can just provide you the specific recommendations based on their disability. So you can improve your sites based on that. Okay. And finally, just to, I guess I passed like 2 minutes already, but one of the things that we can definitely understand about this conversation is reshape your bias. Learn how to unlearn things in century 21st, because it's important, and try to incorporate accessibility in your products. Always think about accessibility first. Accessibility needs to be always part of your planning. Don't forget that. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Merari. I don't think, are there any questions? No, someone was asking for a link and you pasted it, Erica. Good. Okay. Well, if nobody else has any questions, we will let everybody go. Merari, this was really, really good. Thank you so much. It was really interesting.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, this is a great topic to talk about.
Okay. Great. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for attending to the end. And we will see you soon at the next webinars. We hope to see you all.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thank you,
Erica.
Merari.
Bye, Merari. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.